Hi, my name is Jamie Tomey, and I am pleased to welcome you to the Evanston Bound Quarantour series, brought to you by Artist Bookhouse. Each week we get to talk to some amazing book artists and writers, letterpress printers, and paper makers. It's such a good time. I hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to this week's Quarantour with Khanisha Foster. I'm going to read this incredibly layered and dense bio a little bit for you. Khanisha is multi-talented and amazing, so this is going to take a minute.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. It's like the best thing ever. Khanisha was a 2017 Fox Fellow, and she completed a 2-year study of the multiracial voice and code switching on page, stage, and screen. Her writing, along with her life experience of being a daughter of a Black Panther father and a mother whose family invented bubble wrap, landed her a writing gig at K&L Productions, which is Cannon and Laverne McKinnon. She also has written for Probably Monsters, which is a video game company who produced, founded by the creators of Halo and Destiny, which are two incredibly sophisticated and multi-layered video games, and the story game Episodes by Pocket Gems. Her solo show, Joy Rebel, directed by Obie Award winner Lou Bellamy, received critical acclaim and was chosen as DC Staff Metro favorite for 2019. Okay. And she was a featured storyteller on NPR's Dinner Party, along with Lena Waithe, who is also from Evanston. I'm just going to point that out. We've got some awesome Evanston peeps here. She was named one of 18 Black women we think are phenomenal by Maya magazine. Did I say that right, Khanisha?
Yes, I think so. I don't have it in front of me, but I think so.
I think American Theater magazine, holy cow, named her in their roll call series as one of the 6 theater workers you should know. Broadway World named her the best director for The Bluest Eye, which also won. Exciting. For The Bluest Eye, which she directed a couple years ago, I think. We'll talk about that. Mm-hmm. Her film acting debut, which I cannot pronounce the second word of this, Chicago Boricua, was an official selection at the Tribeca Film Festival. She hosts and produced the incredible podcast, How I Wrote That, where she interviews the top women writing for TV and film. And she has interviewed such guests as Kate Gersten from The Good Place, Valerie Woods from Queen Sugar, and Tanya Saracho from Vita. The podcast is at the website www.howIwrotethat.com. So that is quite a layered, awesome thing there, my friend. You are. How did you come to the art of storytelling?
Second Story in Chicago is, well, to be fair, my parents say I was always a storyteller. Like I would be like, when I was a kid, if we were at the park and there was a bridge, like if there was like a play bridge, I would gather all the kids around and be like, and now I will tell you the story of the 3 billy goats gruff. It was like my favorite thing to do. My sister's really still mad about it because she's heard that story a million times now. But I definitely...
You rehearsed the story, you produced it at the playground, you did all the things.
gathered people. In fact, my eldest got that bug because when she was little and we lived in Evanston, we would walk to the Barnes and Noble every day because she loves books and they had a stage. And she was like, we'd go to both the library and Barnes and Noble. And she would do the same thing, gather people around and perform for 45 minutes until she earned a standing ovation from the crowd.
She's like, I'm going to tell you yet another story and you will stand up and rise and applaud.
Yes.
So she has inherited that storytelling gene from you.
Yes, we did that, definitely. And then for me, I actually was really kind of outgoing at home, but very shy at school. Yeah. Until like maybe junior high, end of elementary school, junior high. I started to become more outgoing because of a great acting teacher.
Yeah.
And then I became an actor, and then from becoming an actor, the story goes that basically I would be backstage. I was working for this company that was Serendipity, is now Second Story, who has my whole heart and soul. To this day, always will. Amanda Delheimer. I always say, like, I get to work for some of the best women you could ever work for, and I see some of them are even here right now. So I'm like, I'm gonna brag on everybody here. Cynthia Weiss is Joanne's in front of me. I'm like, I tell people all the time, like, I don't know how I got lucky to be on the path where you get just the best bosses, but that was my deal. And just like not only like good for the organization, but good for your soul, good for your work ethic. So many skills I learned in that time from these women I'm utilizing now. And I feel like they were all have great patience as well. But so Amanda was running Second Story. She had just taken over. We were in a play, and backstage, I was not a writer. At that time, I was like, that's the scariest thing ever. I do not want to be a writer. And we were doing that thing backstage where actors tell stories to each other. They just like whisper backstage. And I was in a Catholic schoolgirl's uniform because I was playing a Catholic schoolgirl. I was also pregnant with my first daughter. I was an adult, but the only person I told, my husband knew, of course, but then we told the costumer because she had to like
let your out.
It was like backstage and everyone's telling stories, and I remember being like, oh yeah, that's like the time that my dad robbed the bank. And then I remember the room was like and I was like, all right, Khanisha, that's not a normal story. Like, people don't just go, my dad robbed the bank. And they were starting the storytelling part of Second Story at that point, which was because a lot of them were working in this wine bar, Webster's Wine Bar at the time, and were wanting to cultivate each other as artists while they were doing these bigger pieces. And so they started this storytelling company that was kind of an offshoot of the original company. And they were like, come write with us. And I was like, that's terrifying. Let's do it. And so they really taught me to write stories. So before that, I was telling stories, I was performing stories. They taught me to write stories. It was pivotal to me. It was like life-changing. Would never have had the experiences I've had in my life if not for the way that company invested in me and all of us, really.
Yeah, I love that. And so that was after college, and then you were with Second City from the start.
Second Story, but I did do some work with Second City.
I'm sorry, Second Story, not Second City. Two different things.
I love them both. They're both very meaningful to me.
Okay, so Second Story, which is still going strong in the midst of the pandemic. They're doing their dinner parties, storytelling parties on Zoom and Eventbrite, and it's been phenomenal as well.
I'm actually directing for them. We have a show coming up mid-September, and we're all going to be in a different city/state. So, but I'll send you details for it. It should be exciting.
And we will absolutely promote it for Artist Bookhouse too, because we like to say things like our friends over at Second Story, our friends over at, Steppenwolf or whatever. But and that sort of thing. So do you want to show your slideshow now? Is that a good slide? Okay. So you're the screen share person. I'm going to spotlight your video too.
All right, so here I go. I'm going to tell you all about my life. Are you ready?
Hi.
Present mode. Okay. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I'll talk through, and Jamie, please interrupt me at any time.
Well, absolutely. Wildly. And also, if people have questions as Khanisha's talking, of course, drop them into the chat, please.
Great. So I put writer, director, actor. I'm trying to figure out what to call myself. You said storyteller. I think that's true. I happen to be a multi-hyphenate, which I think a lot of us are. I also think as women of color, we're often taught to do more. So it's like, there are no parts written for people like you. It's like, learn to be a writer. If there's no one directing like you, it's like, well, learn to be a director. And that sort of really did cultivate me into having a million jobs. I also am the associate director of a MFA in TV and screenwriting. I teach. I do a lot of other things. I do a lot of anti-racism work. But for today, since we're talking about storytelling, I'm going to center it in being a writer, actor, director. Okay, this is where I come from. This is my family. That's my daddy and my mama. I'm with my mom there. My sister's with my dad.
Oh my God. Junie looks just like you. You've heard that before, I'm sure.
My little Juniper.
And I think that's your kid sitting on you back in the day. But of course it's not.
Which is so wild because I always say, like, because I grew up with a black parent and a white parent, and I'm mixed, of course. I mean, when I was really little, people said I looked like my mom. I think you can see it there. And then I definitely look like my dad, I think, now in many ways. But you don't get as much, like, you look just like your parents. Like, you know, I was sort of accustomed to not looking like your parents. Like, that was not, I didn't associate that with part of being a family.
Yeah.
So when I had kids and they were like mirror images, I was like, what is going on? How did this happen? It's magical.
Genetics are weird.
Genetics are weird. I love that we have there's this like plastic cover over the lampshade in back of us, which is so 80s.
Oh my gosh. Is this in Evanston? Were you in Evanston at this time of this photo?
We would have definitely lived in Evanston. I'm not sure if we were in Evanston or in Chicago because I don't think this is our house. I think we're at somebody else's house.
Okay.
But yeah, we lived in Evanston there. And like I said, my dad was a Black Panther before I was born, but that's also where my name comes from.
Oh, nice.
And then my mom was an artist when I was young, like a fine artist, paints. She was always like making things, and she was at school. What was that school? I went to Orrington Elementary School, and I used to walk up the hill to meet her at her college. It was like an education-based, I forget what that was.
Was it National Louis?
National Louis. Yeah. I used to meet her there, and we'd go into the clay making, and we would make like art together after school.
Oh,
like,
I love that.
And we probably lived, I think at this point we lived in South Evanston, and just after this we moved to North Evanston. So we lived everywhere you could live in Evanston when I was a kid. And that also was part of the mixedness thing, I think.
Yeah, that helped. I have a question about growing up in Evanston later, but I'll hold off.
Okay. So those are my parents, and my sister, one of my sisters. I have some other great siblings too that are younger than me that we grew up together. These I wanted to show you this too, just to show you like all the people that are in my body. So this is like my mom's side and my dad's side, as you can see. My mom's parents, I don't know if you can see, this is my mom's dad and my mom's mom. This is my dad's parents are here. My grandpa here was called Iron Man. His name was Iron Man. You can see he's so buff. This is him too. He was a lifeguard, and that's how he met my grandmother, who was in nursing school. He was like showing off for her, doing dives at the pool. And that's how they met. And these humans on here could not be more different from each other. We used to live on opposite ends of the red line because my mom's family was as far north as you could go. My dad's family was as far south as you could go. So we spent our childhood like riding that train back and forth to see our families in these like totally different worlds. And I bring that up to the writing because that's basically what I write about, is like how cultures collide.
And how they work together and work not together, which isn't the best way to put it. That's not the phrase I meant, but you know what I mean.
It's complicated. Yeah, it's not all easy. I think there's a lot of comedy there. I like to write from a place of, I say, slapstick and heartbreak.
Oh, yes, they're sides of a coin.
Yeah. And then this is my mama here. This is my daddy here.
Cuties.
Oh, I don't have more pictures of my dad here, but anyway, those are my fam bams.
I love it.
I brought a picture of Denzi Senna, whom I am not related to. But because the first time and Denzi Senna, of course, is a writer, a very brilliant one. She wrote a lot of different books, but the first book I ever read of hers was Caucasia. Denzi Senna is a mixed race writer. I bring her up because when I read her book, it was the first time I realized that mixedness was also a cultural truth.
Oh,
because I was raised to know that I was Black and white, and those things were both true, and they're both true in me. And I knew that I was mixed. I was very empowered by my parents. I mean, I don't think you can be raised by a man who's like a Black radical and not be empowered in your body, to be yourself.
Right.
But maybe you can be, but that's not how it was for me. And I grew up in Evanston, which I call the Mecca of mixedness, because like so many people are mixed there, which is why my grandmother, who is my mom's mom, who's white, was also a real estate agent, and she basically chose Evanston for us because she didn't really understand Blackness or mixedness, or she'd never met Black people before my dad and we came along. But she was very loving towards me and my life. We were extremely close. And when we were little, the way she thought she could help was to put us in an environment where we would see other people who were like us.
Oh, I love that. And I love the consideration of that for her, especially to go beyond the point of never knowing or seeing a Black person or having a relationship with a Black person, to understanding that need for her grandchildren. That's beautiful.
I think it's really, and she's, she was very like, humility maybe. She like worked hard. Like she grew up like her mother never told her she was beautiful because she thought it would spoil a child.
Oh no.
So she was like very beautiful, very loving. She and I laughed like crazy together. We were ridiculous together our whole life, the whole time she was alive during my time. And I think we felt very free together, which was interesting because you'd think that would be a very different experience, having a white grandparent who really didn't understand race.
Yeah.
She was just worked from a place of love. But Caucasia came out, and I was reading Caucasia, and I was reading the same experiences, like the same life experiences. And it's a fictional story, but Caucasia is basically about, I'm just going to pump these books up because we're talking library stuff, and I love some books.
Yeah, have that.
About two sisters who are mixed race, but one looks more Black and one looks more white. And when their parents divorce, they are raised by the parent that looks most like them.
Oh, wow.
And to me, that was just like, and I remember there's this one scene. Remember, like my father was a Black revolutionary, but like there was this one scene where she walks into like somewhere with her dad, and in the back of the house, there's a group of men meeting, and there are guns on the table, and they're just talking. Yeah. And that is straight from my life directly. I was like, how did she write that? Yeah. So I became quite obsessed with her work. It turns out this is Where Did You Sleep Last Night? These are her parents. And our parents actually have really similar stories in terms of who they were as people. And Danzy actually and I became friends decades later in life. We met recently through the Fox Fellowship. Turns out we live in the same town. We drive the same kind of car, like in California now. Like,
wow.
I read for work 20 years ago. So
wow, that's incredible. I have goosebumps.
Anyway, so this talk about influence for me, I used to think I had to write myself into what people wanted. Or actually, I used to think I had to perform myself into what people wanted. Writing gave me the ability to really be myself, which I needed.
That's gorgeous.
And this is what the inside of my brain looks like, in case anybody was wondering.
I love it.
Yeah,
this is good that you're showing this, because I was wondering always what Khanisha's brain looks like, and this actually
this is what it currently looks like. You can see I've got my stand-up records on the wall behind me, and my theater pictures.
Yeah,
I share this because you know how earlier I said I love slapstick and heartbreak, and I just feel like all these people do that.
Yeah, they already have that within them. That is fantastic.
And so I think like my thing is like when I write, I'm trying to write from my real voice, and like look at all these people. Look at how like high character they are, but they'll all break your heart. They're all like, when I think of Carol Burnett, everything she's ever done, but especially like in this role in Annie, which of course it was a formative film for me as a 5-year-old, but when she plays Mrs. Hannigan, and when you see how broken she is, it's like, I just think that's one of the greatest performances of all time, to be honest. I just think it is.
be able to carry both sides.
And then-
So Sean dropped into the chat. Sean Lentz actually says, "Love that, love you." So just FYI,
Thanks.
put that in the chat there for you.
Okay.
It's short.
Yes, for some reason I can't see the chat right now, so you keep it coming to me for whatever. Please stop me. Okay.
Zoom
sorry.
thing. Yeah, have at it.
Now you know what my brain looks like. Let's keep moving. So then, of course, I became an actor because how could I not? With the life stories, I was just like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to perform. Which this is a shot from For Color Girls at Penumbra Theater, and I wanted to show off all these amazing women.
Yeah, I love that. So what year was that? I can't remember.
This we did just a few years ago. I want to say 2018, just a couple years ago, which was really Penumbra Theater actually is the second oldest African American theater company in the country and formidable. And they actually just changed themselves from a theater to a racial healing center.
Oh, I love that.
They will still do plays, but they are centering themselves in the work that needs to be done to keep Black bodies safe.
I love that. And so, who adapted this?
So we did straight Ntezake's play, Ntezake Shange, For Color Girls Who've Considered Suicide When the Rainbow Is Enough.
Oh, I thought it was poetry to start.
It is. Oh, actually, I can tell you the start of it. Oh,
yeah.
I love to talk about this.
Please.
So it was. So Ntezake Shange was basically in the Bay Area. And first of all, one of the amazing things about doing this play at Penumbra is we were with the community that was close to the original cast. Lori Carlos was part of the Penumbra family. The choreographer who choreographed our show had worked directly with Lori Carlos. She was in their company. So we got to hear a lot of the roots of the actual story. So the real story is that Ntezake Shange was writing these poems and they had these kind of like performance nights, and one of their partners was unjustly arrested. And so they started performing the poems to raise money to support him.
Oh, wow.
And then they started having lines out the door, and then they started selling out tickets. And in that initial in the initial moments, it was women of color. It was all different women of color. So then what happened is it was picked up, of course, it was making money. Joe Papp picked it up and brought it to New York. And this is interesting because at that point, he decided that it should be about Black women and it should be about their sorrow.
Okay.
Which is complicated because it has become an anthem for us as Black women to carry our spirits forward. And I think it's so important to center that story. But then you also got to go back and say the idea of a Black woman was transformed, that a Black woman created and was transformed and focused on our sorrow. And how does that complicate it?
Yeah, exactly. And what was his right to do that? Was it his, there's that layer of question, is having this man come in.
Yeah. And that I think is, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's it. That just, how did he come to have that right?
And that's a question we ask a lot. So where I'm the associate director of the master's program, we're actually unapologetically, our goal is to get more women and underrepresented voices in the writing room. And part of the way we do that is we look at the history of writing and for TV and film and whose histories have been erased. And then we try to re-amplify those histories. And we see actually so much through history. There's even a project now, I forget who's doing it, but it's like renaming books that were written by women who had to have male synonyms.
Yeah.
Not synonyms, had to have male
author.
Yeah, author.
Pseudonyms.
So here we go.
I read about that.
So Zadie Smith, who's also a mixed race artist. I'm going to talk a lot about mixedness today, even though I connect to a lot of different things about myself, but my writing is a lot about mixedness. Zadie Smith wrote this piece called Speaking in Tongues, which she also gives as a speech. And she talks about what it was to have this one voice and then go to Oxford and be trained out of it.
Oh.
And that is like, that piece was like sort of at the center of the fellowship I did, because I was thinking a lot about how people who are not singular in identity are asked to make singular art.
It's choices. You have to choose between the different identity pieces.
Yeah. And my hypothesis on that is that it makes for less innovative work, and it puts the artist in a place where they can't bring everything they have to it, and that art is lessened. That doesn't mean you can't tell parts of yourself, but if you feel like if you have to be one thing when your body is not. So anyway, Zadie Smith said, I regret it of taking part of her voice out of her mouth. I regret it. I should have kept both voices alive in my mouth. But to mention the double is to suggest shame at the singular.
Oh my God.
And that for me, yeah. I'm such a talker.
Oh, it just to let it sit for a minute. That's gorgeous.
And it's something I needed to hear, because I have great pride in my identity, and I have no one can tell me nothing about my Blackness.
Yeah.
And that's it. Bottom line, like, I know I'm a Black woman. And also there's a lot of parts of me that I need to bring to the table to be a full person and a full artist. One
of the questions that I was thinking about with you in particular, but this is also what we spoke about last week with our writer last week, who's a gay man, and he was we've been talking about this because we talk about, okay, I have to say this in the way that I wrote it down before, because I'm going to stumble. Like I said, I asked like 12 questions in one. But we at Artist Bookhouse talk a lot about representation in story and in art, and in the combination of the book arts with those, and the power of seeing one's identity, whatever that identity may specifically be, whether it's a double or a single. It's I'm a gay man, or I'm a queer writer, or a Black woman, or whatever it might be.
Several of those things together.
The power of seeing one's identity in stories, especially when growing up. So you're kind of touching on this a little bit, and I know we have more slides to get through. So just thinking about finding yourselves in stories growing up, it sounds like you didn't until you read Caucasia. You didn't really see yourself represented, or did you?
Oh, yeah. No, not at all.
Not at all. And then,
yeah.
So we can talk about this next part later, but just thinking about our current times and own voices, who's telling each story and who gets to tell what story. And like you said, owning your own Blackness and being a Black woman, but also pulling in from those other pieces of your mixed identity, as well as not shaming the singular, but also really honoring that multitude within yourself. And other authors are doing this, other performers are doing this, other people are doing this within their own identities. But how I want to talk later about how that has changed, or if it has changed enough, given that we are raising young people, and how you support your daughters in their own identities and finding their identities in what they're watching and doing and seeing.
Oh, yes.
Just like I'm trying to support my son in watching and seeing and doing other things that are not just white male performances, because I feel like that's my responsibility. So let's just put that question in the hat. And
I got answer for you.
I know. I was like, I got to talk to Khanisha. So let's move to the next slide. But I want you to have that in the back of your head a little bit too, because that's I feel like that's definitely representation is what you're talking about. And the fact that you are helping move that MFA program in a way that will be, significantly better because of representation.
Okay. We're talking about representation as innovation. Like, I always want to stress that, because a lot of times when people talk about representation, they act as if they are doing a favor to someone.
Right.
And it's not a favor to you. If anything, it's a favor to the work.
Right.
Because when you bring people who can be in their authentic selves to the work gets better. It just gets better.
Exactly.
And if we want the work to be, what we do is we separate that and we act as if the work will suffer if we make this if we allow this to happen. No. The work, people are already at the top of their game work-wise. You are lucky they're in the room. So invite them in.
Yeah. And honor
just put this. Yeah, that. So I just put this together real quick again to talk about, again, I started directing accidentally. So this is me storytelling at the top left, the second story when we were on the road. These are some of the productions that I've directed, not all of them, but just kind of a handful of them. This is Bluest Eye in the middle. The first time I directed it, I've directed it twice. And you'll notice this image is important to me because the play itself is about colorism and beauty standards and so many more things, but these false beauty standards of whiteness. And she always talks about these white women who she idolizes in it and wants to look like. And of course, the little girl, the center of it, wishes for blue eyes.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, I had thought about, I wish I had the artist's name in front of me. I'll have to send it to you because I hate to mention an artist and not get to mention their name. I did the same thing with the dance company earlier, but I was in Chicago on the UFC, the one in along the lake.
Hyde Park? UFC in Hyde Park?
Yeah, Hyde Park. I was in there. Yes, and I was in their museum, and they had this piece, and it looked like this white pearl wallpaper, and then there were these like frames around these faces that were smiling.
Yeah.
And it looked like, and then when you stood there, you realized that the wallpaper was actually a full picture. And forgive me for saying this, but the full picture was a lynching, and the smiling faces were white people who had gone to watch.
Yeah. Wow.
And I have never been able to shake that image and the way it appeared, and the idea that oppression is so deeply embedded in our bodies, pain is so deeply embedded in our bodies that it almost looks like people can discuss it as if it's the beautiful parts of life. Like it's just like, it just shook me. So you see, like we papered her house with images of the women she talks about in the play. And this is their two houses in the play. And then whenever she went home, we kind of papered her world with the images that filled her mind.
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about like how much do we actually whitewash, literally like put a whitewash of paint over that. How much do we want to see their faces or not? I'm not sure if this was the final image we landed on. Then here there's an organization called What She Said, and it's about uncovering the history of women by a woman, Julia Baer, who's genius, who's been doing those videos, and just a bunch of others. This is when I directed for Colored Girls down on the left.
Yeah.
And this other one is the production of Bluest Eye, the second production I directed, where you can see our Joe Reynoso, our set designer, wanted to imagine what the little girls would see if they looked up. So he made a whole huge space full of like the clotheslines that then like tried to create perspective of like how the world has enveloped them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
And then this is continuing on what you were asking me before, another quote from Zadie Smith: "We feel that our voices are who we are, and that to have more than one or to use different versions of a voice for different occasions represents at best a Janus-faced duplicity, and at worst the loss of our very souls." And I pulled that because there's part of the research from the fellowship was that people find mixedness cognitively disorienting is the word.
Ooh, okay.
And the reason for that is because our brains naturally try to process singularly so that we have a better understanding of what's in front of us. And so what happens is if you see someone who is not singular, and not just in race, I mean, we talk about this in terms of gender and sexual identity. We talk about this in terms of, the social location of your body, how many different things exist in one body. And so what happens is you automatically, as your body can process a mixed person as a liar, because it doesn't seem possible that more than one thing can exist. So we automatically call them false.
Oh my goodness.
And we don't do it intentionally. And I think that's probably the danger of it. And there is, don't get me wrong, a lot that needs to be acknowledged about the privilege that lives in mixedness. So this is not a speech about ignoring that. It's about actually acknowledging that and acknowledging that there's a lot of things happening in a mixed body and a mixed voice.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I became a writer. This is for my podcast.
Yeah.
You see how it has books and TV and film and a typewriter? Like, you know, to me, it was like I saw this image that was like a free copyright image of a man standing on top of books in a TV. And I was like, no. I was like, it needs to be some red heels.
Yeah.
But it just represents that I started to try to figure out all the questions I'm asking on the page.
Oh, I love it.
And then we'll come back to this. My Zadie Smith. This is what she actually said. I think the hardest thing for anyone is accepting that other people are real as you are, not using them as tools, not using them as examples or things to make yourself feel better or things to get over or under, just accepting they are absolutely as real as you are. And I think that's what I'm trying to do when I write. I'm just trying to like think about not just what hurts, but what we celebrate, the nuance of who we are, have a more complicated conversation. And I think because I want to have a more complicated conversation, it takes me longer to get to things sometimes. Because I try to write through what people want me to write and to get to what I actually want to write. Because for me, I acknowledge that I'm very influenced by the number of images I've seen in my life that try to tell me what normal is. And because of that, I'm sometimes very frustrated because I'm a screenwriter, and I might see my peers who maybe their bodies are part of dominant culture and they can write in a really easy, fun, quick way.
Yeah.
That's not what writing is like for me. Because I'm constantly like, if I write that, you know, what does that trope become? And if I write this, what does that become? But then it's a harder process, but I feel like what it gets me to is actually getting to say something that I haven't seen before.
It gets you to pearl. It's like all that other stuff is what is it called? The clam? It's not a clam, right? The oyster. And then it gets you to the pearl.
Yes, I hope so. And I couldn't have done that without Second Story, because they created this process. We used to call them BAMs and SAMs, big ass meetings and small ass meetings. And the small ass meetings were your bi-weekly writers group, and the big ass meetings were when we would come together and we would all train together once a month.
Yeah.
It's like its own graduate program that we created for each other.
I love that. And not as expensive as regular graduate school.
Yes. And you could fail so much.
Yeah. And it was part of the process built in.
Yeah.
That failure is not failure. It's a learning choice to make.
Yeah.
To learn. Did you have another slide, or is this your last one?
Okay. Let's see. I think I have one more. Oh no, two more. Stromae, I just love his work. He definitely creates work for multiplicity. And so I would look him up.
Oh.
This was from Joy Rebel, which is the solo show I ended up writing, which I think speaks to what I was saying. I finally felt like I wrote something that was about mixedness that I wouldn't be able to convey in a Facebook discussion because, you know, we can't hear that way, but was true to me.
Love that. And she says, Joy Rebel is by turns risible. My eyes are not the greatest.
Yeah, visible and heartbreaking. It becomes a vehicle for her to do something that the world, with its boxes and binary divisions, stubbornly refuses to let her do. To find herself in this show, she gets to hold up a mirror so people can see their imaginative limitations and perhaps gain the freedom she craves.
Oh, I love that. And of course your writing is lush and descriptive. Of course.
Forgive me for throwing in this one where she compared me to Roxane Gay and Lindy West and Tracy K. Smith because I almost died. I was just like, could I just have that a little longer? And I'll do one more thing. Okay.
that's comparing Roxane Gay to you. I'm just saying.
My God. I died. Obviously they're geniuses, and no, I can't write with their consistency and fervor, but I do my best. This is the last thing that I pulled from what Zadie Smith said when she said, being able to get both of her voices back in her mouth. I felt a sort of wonder at the flexibility of the thing, like being alive twice.
Oh, gorgeous. Yay, Zadie Smith.
Yay, okay.
Did you want to touch on that representation as innovation bit a little bit more, and how has that changed for our kids?
Yep. What's so interesting is so I did not have any images of myself growing up. I can't think of any. I really can't. And I spend time thinking about it, a lot of time. Yeah. And not just like as a woman of color or a Black woman or a mixed woman, but as a woman with broad shoulders, as a woman made of muscle, as a woman like with a big head. Like I just like did not see anyone who was not delicate and white.
Delicate, white, tiny with big boobs.
Yeah. And if that's your body, like, yes, celebration. Like this is not a competition of that. It's a discussion of the lack of images of everyone else, Yeah. So I didn't have that, and it definitely affected me. And then when I was in high school, we had to play at ETHS. We had to read a play a week. And I was reading a play a week, and I couldn't find a monologue that represented me. And and then in college, I kept reading a play a week, and I couldn't find. And then I realized at one point, once I was a professional, that I had read a play a week my whole life, from that, like my whole adult life, and I still had never found a single part that represented me. And it flipped for me because I always felt before that I just wasn't working hard enough
to find it.
Yes. And then I realized, like, how could I possibly read more? And then
blaming yourself, it just
didn't exist.
Yeah, wow.
And it wasn't because the writers didn't exist, which I think is a myth. Like they're like, well, if somebody would write it, it would exist.
They didn't. Right.
If somebody would publish it, it would exist. If somebody would do all the work to make it, it would. I mean, the culture did not make room for it. And and then I was at a conference, and I was moderating a discussion with like mixed race people in theater, and I asked them, how many have you ever seen a role in theater that looks like you? And we were able to come up with 4 plays, and three of them had been written by people in the room.
Oh my God. Probably was.
And there's a mythology that it comes from colorism, that mixed people work all the time because things are written for them. That's not what happens. What happens is the industry pits us against each other by not hiring dark-skinned people to play Black people as they should be hired and revered and celebrated on screen, on stage, everywhere. And so what happens is we end up playing roles that are not in our cultural truth at all. So you might see mixed bodies working on TV, but those bodies are also not being able to be in their full truth. So then we perpetuate a problem where nobody is being cast and nobody is doing work that is authentic to them. And then we're pit against each other instead of the structures that created that problem.
Yeah.
All that. So back to my girls. So when I lived in Evanston, every toy store in Evanston knew me. Because I would come in on a weekly basis and see if they had dolls and books of color.
Yeah.
And I would ask them every week I remember I was at the Target on Howard, and the only time I ever saw a Black doll in that Target was they had an end cap during Christmas where they had Black dolls. And I asked them, where are your dolls of color? Like, why don't you have any? And they were like, we don't do that.
We don't do that.
So I wrote a letter to Target every year, never heard. I'd go into all the toy stores, and if they had a diverse doll collection, I would just make sure it stayed. I would go, there were a couple stores I remember downtown where their answer was always, oh, we must have just sold out. And I would be like, you lie.
Yeah.
You lie, and I'm watching.
I was here last week.
Yeah, right. I'm here every week. Like I'm persistent. I'm like, times are changing, and I don't have time to give. And then but it was so hard. I called actually with Cynthia as my boss. I used that time to cultivate a multicultural reading list that I taught to my students, and I also read to my daughter. And it was so hard to create a list where she could see herself, but I was like, I have to do this for her and for these students. And we created this whole after school program where we read books like from all around everywhere we could find. And then now that that child is now 16, about to be 17. And I also have a 7-year-old. With my 7-year-old, I can find it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's so great and it's so moving, but then also I feel such mourning for anyone my age. I feel mourning for my teenager. Like I feel mourning for like all the kids who didn't see that and didn't get that, as happy as I am to see it now. But like my kiddo, my littlest loves science. She wants to be an astronaut for aliens specific, and so she can be a doctor for aliens specifically. And she's like, I get that people are not sure if aliens exist yet, but I'd like to be ready to do that job. So she wants to become a doctor and astronaut.
Yeah, just in case. We don't know.
Yeah. And her room is filled with science books that feature people of color, posters that are framed of scientists that were women of color throughout history and their accomplishments, films, like it's so accessible now. I don't think it's enough, by the way, but I like it's such a difference from what we had to do then. And she has this ease in her that I have never had, and I don't think my eldest has. Like, I don't think a lot of people of color get to have.
Yeah.
And I think it's because, like, at one point when she was little, she was watching her iPad and she was like, everybody looks like me on all these shows. And I was like, what?
Oh, pivotal moment. I love that.
Keep it coming.
And also, why couldn't it happen sooner? And it needs to be more, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. It's not mainstream. Like, they exist if you're looking.
Yeah, but it's not mainstream. So, I think we've already talked about how did growing up here influence your passions and your career path, because it kind of already did that conversation, right? So did you have anything else to add about Evanston and Evanston Township and Chicago and growing up here? Or did you want to move on?
Yeah, no, Evanston was complicated for me, actually. It was
it's complicated for a lot of people, and it's still very complicated, and it's going to be for a long time. Yeah. So yeah, go ahead. Sorry to.
I mean, I was definitely in the group of kids who when you went from junior high to high school, if you were not white, they put you in regular classes, and if you were white, they put you in honors and AP classes. And unless you had a parent who was very, very actively advocating for you, you could make it happen, but they assumed you weren't intelligent.
Yeah.
And I found the school system in Evanston, just to be honest, very, very difficult. It made me want to quit. It made me feel like I wasn't smart.
Were you at Haven for your middle school? Where did you go to?
Orrington, Haven, and then ETHS. Haven was a saving grace because of the acting teachers there. They really, Miss Quinn and Miss Alderman. Is that right? I haven't said it out loud for so long. Alderman? They were both in my show. I wrote them into my solo show. They had such an effect on me. But they were the first people that were like, they were the first teachers I had that were actually like, I think you might be smart and talented. Yeah. It was so dismissive behavior by every other teacher.
Oh my God.
And painful because like I am smart. I run a master's program now, and I couldn't even get a teacher to speak to me like I had any intelligent thoughts in my head. That was frustrating for me, but theater was really a saving grace. It made me feel very in my voice, and I loved that part of it. High school was, it is what it is. Like we had our 4 cafeterias that were segregated.
Oh my.
Nobody said, like, it wasn't like the rule, but you knew it was lunchtime, and that's really complicated when you're mixed, because you're like,
where do I go?
And there was like the student center was where people who were like I mean, we thought ourselves as maybe like a little weirder, but we weren't. There was a lot of like preppiness in there too. But if you didn't want to go to one that was one of the segregated cafeterias, you'd go in the student center to eat lunch, and you couldn't do that until sophomore year.
Yeah.
And then I saw that book that was written about ETHS like 20 years before I went there. That was like, why are all the black kids sitting together in the cafeteria?
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
disappear. Yeah.
I actually was in North Carolina directing a play when I saw that book on a bookshelf, and I picked it up and I was like, this is just like what happened at my high school. Then I read the back. I was like, oh, she went to my high school. So that was like really, I was like, that is an accurate, it must be accurate read.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So we only have a few more minutes, but I want to there's so many questions I have, and I just want to hang out with you, Khanisha. Like we just need to hang out. So you already also talked about your dedication and commitment to representation as innovation in storytelling in all forms, and how you use your positions to support that commitment and to help that move forward in the ways it needs to. So that was check one of the questions off. And then let's oh gosh, I have like 4 more questions, but we don't have time. Such a great conversation. Okay, so you have such a varied career spanning all kinds of different things and interests, but they all tie into storytelling in one way or another. That's kind of the through line that I feel like you have, and that heartbeat in you. What is it about each form, directing, acting, teaching, interviewing other creatives, writing, and performing, that draws you to it? So I don't know that we have time to go into each one of these, or
I can tell you. I know the answer.
Things I want to know.
For me, it's very simple. It's making people laugh.
It's so funny.
That's it. They all connect that way. When I was a little girl, my dad was a nurse and my grandmother was a nurse. And I thought I was supposed to be a nurse because that seemed like such a noble thing to do, to help people. And they were such brilliant people. And my dad, but I was like, but Dad, my favorite thing to do is make people laugh. And my dad told me, I must have been like 4 years old, but I remember it very well. He was like, there's nothing like if you make someone laugh, you save their life every bit as someone who was a doctor or a nurse. I was like, decided.
That's my role. I'm going to save people's life through humor. I love that. Thank you. Hi again. Thank you so much for watching this week's Quarantour. We really appreciate your support. If you want to learn more about our guest from today, please read the description below. And if you'd like to support more programming like this, coming from Artist Bookhouse, please visit our website at artistbookhouse.org/donate. Thank you again for joining us.